Dad would always plant a big garden. Arthur Sturdivant, he used to plow our garden. I remember he had the first Ford Ferguson tractor, because my mother used to let me do so many things or take part in it. And I remember a lot of kids would say, oh, I had to get out and weed. I never minded weeding the garden. My father often tell about he worked with this Corey Hatch, and Corey would not throw away anything that was a vegetable. So Dad used to have this little dowel with a point on it. So when I thinned the carrots, I'd pull the carrot up and I'd poke a hole with the dowel and put the carrot right down beside it, and then I'd make the roll wider. We always had a tremendous lot of carrots, and we raised beet greens, and we raised, my mother used to can wonderful beet greens. They're good for you. And I remember picking up the beet greens and taking them back to the house, and we had a wire basket. My mother would bring out a couple of buckets of water. First we'd put them in one bucket and rinse them up and down. Then she'd put them in that little wire bucket and we'd drain them, and she'd dump some more water on, so make sure we got all the dirt off the beet greens. She would say, well, let's go down and get some jars, and she'd get the canning jars, and I would carry them up for her, and then go down and get some more and carry them up. And then she had this, what they call a big canner with hold 8 quarts, and it had a rack in it, so you could put the quarts in the rack and then lower them down. Well, the first thing I always remember she would do, she'd get the jars ready. So she'd get the water boiling, we'd sterilize the jars and everything. So that would be set to one side, and she'd have another little kettle with hot water, and she'd put the jar rubbers in it and the jar covers. And then she'd be cooking the beet greens. And when they got just about right and tender and all that, she would reach in there, and she had a nice set of tongs, and pull out one of those quart jars, and she'd put the beet greens in there and pack them in there good, and snap the rubber on and snap the cover tight, and then she would put it in and cook them a few seconds more in the boiling water. Then she'd take the jars out and stand them on end with the covers down, and that was more or less, in case they leaked, they was leaking. And then she'd cover them with a big heavy blanket, because she didn't want any cold air or she used to say draft hitting the bottles and breaking them, or cracking them, let's put it that way. And that was just one process.
Our cellar looked like Hannaford's. The racks up underneath the floor timbers down cellar was racks, and my father went off fishing and brought in big pollocks, split them, salted them, and dried them, dried pollock, and those racks would be filled with the fish. Then we had the big gardens, and my mother and daughters would take and can all summer. So that cellar looked just like Hannaford's store. There was barrels of potatoes, barrels of this, barrels of that, besides all the, and even eggs. Eggs was put down in the, what the hell was the name of the stuff? Water glass. They used water glass and put eggs in it, they keep forever.
Oh yeah, we sold apples, but I don't know, in those days we picked the apples. There was an orchard in the south of the barn, and then there was one south of the house. And we'd pick those apples and put them in the cellar in large boxes, about 6 foot square. And in the winter time, the very first of winter, these apple packers would come, and they'd put the apples in barrels and supposedly ship them to England. Then the poor ones we put in cider. We made about 3 barrels of cider. The cider mill was right down where Carol Walsh lives now, right in the corner. George Pinkham lived there. And he ground that with one horse when it goes around on the other side of the building. You pour these apples in the middle, and there was a round, big round wood like this, and there was 2 or 4 holes cut in it here. And as he come around, the apples would get in landing because this thing that turned here was out, and that would go in the holes and squeeze the apples. He made that cider, I think it was 10 cents a gallon. Oh yeah, we used that, everything, vinegar was greatest stuff, vinegar. And then of course, everybody come out drank cider, and haying time they drank cider every load. You're going out there pitching on hay by hand, you had to have something to drink. We planted them, and we sure had plenty of beans for all winter. We'd have stewed beans Wednesday night without a doubt, and Saturday night we'd have baked beans. Planted the beans, of course we cultivated them, the horse and the cultivator, and hold them, kept the dirt all around them, kept them good until they got ripe. And then we got ready to harvest them. We kept the poles, that is, a bean pole like this, and you'd get a pole, and you'd cut the limbs off out here, so it'd be out here 4 or 5 inches. And then you set this pole right in the ground here. You put 2 sticks on, 2 edges, one here across like that, the other one over here across here. And then you get little sticks and you put from one corner to the other corner here. So you pull the beans and get them in your hands together. And then you separate them and you put them down over the pole. And so some of them would hang on this up here so they wouldn't be too tight. And you lap them over by the pole. The next guy pulled his beans, he'd put them on this way. And the next guy would put his on this way. And let them stand. And it rained on them, it didn't hurt anything. But then as soon as they got it ripe out there on the pole, you put them in the barn floor, back of the barn floor. And then come early November or something, and the weather was getting colder, you'd sweep the barn floor all clean, and spread out, you could put out 2 poles of those beans, stiff them upside down, because then they'd slide down off, and put the poles back over in the corner of the barn and keep them for next year, and spread these beans out about 1 foot thick all over the floor. Then you take a bean trailer, a stick, here's the main stick, and a hole through here, and a short piece that comes down about this long, and this up here, he had a hole through it right there, right down through there, and a leather went, and this was notched right around there, so a piece of leather went around, could go round and round that, and into this stick that come down here, and this was a thrail. You take that, you just thrail that on now. You pick it up and you throw it on now. Pick it up and throw it on now. And then you go all over them about twice. Then you pick them up and see if there's any beans left in the pods. If there was, or was any beans left, and now you'd thrail them again. And then we'd sweep them up and put them in bags. And then there'd come a windy day like it would be fall here, like this. It seemed like these days just gone by here, this windy. You'd get it out the corner of the shed, where the wind was quite strong, and you'd take the wash tub and set it down here, and have these beans in a bucket up here, and you'd pour them out very slow down there, and the wind would blow the dirt out of them. You get them all clean, ready for the house. Ready for them to pick them over, because then they had to be picked over ready, because there'd be other bigger pieces of dirt in them, they wouldn't be perfectly clean. And then later my father bought a bean winding machine. You dump them in the top and you turn the handle on here, and it'll blow the winds out, and the beans will drop down into a metal thing about this wide and about that long. And the beans would be perfectly clean.
Another thing I always remember, I always loved to do, and she was good, Mum was, she loved to make these special mustard pickles. And all they consisted of was really little buttonhole onions and cauliflower. So she would get out her big old wooden board and she'd break up the cauliflower and she said, now you cut that into 3/4 inch chunks or 1 inch chunks. So that was a big deal for a child. Just very easy, cut all that, and she'd scrape it to one side and put it in a big bunch of cold water. And then she'd say, well, here's a job, just take your time. And of course she'd give me about 5 pounds of those little buttonhole onions. So you had to be very careful. I'll always remember, she'd give me a little paring knife and you start the skin, and you pull the skin off each one of those little buttonhole onions. You know, that's small, and it took a lot of time. And I'd sit there, had a good time doing it, and I'd have those, and she'd put them all in another dish of cold water. Then she'd take the onions and she'd just cook them to a right degree, and it's the same with the cauliflower. And see her doing it now. And she'd set that to one side. Then she'd make out this most beautiful, smooth, sweet mustard sauce. It wasn't a bitter mustard, just a sweet, delicate sauce. I could taste it today. I never could duplicate it. I don't know why. I've tried and tried, but yeah, I could sit there and just eat a jar of mustard sauce. It was so nice. And then she'd make that mustard sauce up, and then she'd dump the cauliflower in the pickle, and the cauliflower and the onions in. And once in a while, she'd put some red peppers in, sweet red peppers, just for the color. And then she got that to a certain degree, and of course the jars are being all sterilized in that boiling water, and the rubbers and the covers, and she'd fill each jar full, and she usually made them in pint jars. Once in a while she'd use half-pint jars. Then she'd snap the rubber on and put the cover on and seal it. And she'd just dunk it in that boiling water and then stand them on end again. And everybody at Christmas time wanted a jar of my mother's beautiful sweet mustard pickles. And Christmas time, so many people them days, they'd rather have a jar of beautiful mustard pickles and have you buy a present.
You had hens.
Oh yeah, hens. I guess we did. We went about 700, and then we shipped our eggs to Boston.
Now, how did you do that?
We do that. We put them in 30 dozen in a case of eggs, 15 in this end of the case and 15 there. It was made out of very thin wood, and we'd put 15 dozen in there. And tomorrow morning, them eggs would have to be over and onto the train at 9 o'clock. Passenger train went through, which we called the express train. That was so-called the express train. That was small things like eggs and say. And so we raised veal cows and we butchered them and had them shipped them to Boston to Faneuil Hall Market, and we'd have them over there and put them on the express train or a case of eggs. My lodge, yes, then we raised course cabbages and made our own sauerkraut. We'd make about 2/3 of a barrel of sauerkraut. You keep that right in the entry going into the house. And every meal we'd have some sauerkraut. Sauerkraut was just as regular bread and butter. So we raised corn, for the hens, and this called field corn. The ears was long like this, and you'd plant half an acre, 3/4 an acre or more, and you'd gather that all in and haul that up and put it in the dump cart and haul that up to the barn and dump it on the floor. And then you'd have a whole, say this was the barn floor, all along there you'd have a string of corn that would be, say, pretty high set couch or up high as this and come out into the floor like 2 or 3 feet all down there and all down on this side. They'd have husking bees.
And if you got a red ear, what happened?
Huh?
If you got a red ear.
Oh, right here, you could kiss the girl like right here, and she couldn't say a word. That's right. She kissed the girl. Grab her and kiss her. You own these woods out here and pine trees out here, but come winter time, you'd cut some of them and bring them in with the oxen and put them on the lake, and then put a boom around them, and keep them right down till the ice all gone. And see, we used to sell our logs down the foot of the lake. Well, we'd want a good strong north wind. Then we'd get as many sheets as we could off my mother, make a sail with, and we'd two of us would have pick poles. You'd get on the log, you'd stand right on these trees, and as the wind would take you down, you'd steer them so you'd keep them off the land. Have a long pick pole here, you'd stand as you could long on these long log sits on the side, and push yourself in on the land, keep them in on the lake, and keep them moving down. We didn't have trucks in those days. Well, I have cut hay with oxen, but it was the damnedest job to cut hay with oxen. Oxen couldn't stand heat, and you'd have to you'd have to perhaps go out here tonight after work, it was cool, and mow some, because they couldn't stand heat. And then the damnedest thing is, you get your oxen coming along here in the square corner right there, and they know that's a square corner, and they'll be easing back here a little bit. Then that'll let your mowing machine clog up. Then that'll make you mad. Then you have to back up and clean the knife and get your ox goat out there and kind of start up that off one a little bit, and the bread into him and get him going so it would mow right out clean. Then you had to run around behind, grab the handle and pull it back, pick the cutterbar up and swing it around, get ready to start again.
So you used horses more?
Oh, good God, yes. Yes, my mother talked my father into having horses right during haying season. He couldn't come to the house out. He advised us, for God's sake, get us a pair of horses so we can mow.
But you didn't keep them over
Keep them over, yes, we kept them over and rooked them to the window, getting out wood and hauling out logs, and so it's way ahead of oxen, way ahead. Way ahead. Well, as I always said to the father, I'll haul out the logs because, my God, I can take the horse and haul out, and I can ride on the logs. Otherwise, they'll take the damn oxen. I've got to run alongside of them. Let's use the horses. So we got a smaller pair, and then that didn't satisfy us, and then we got a heavy pair of horses. They was weigh about 1,500 pounds apiece. They was good. God, we could bring out logs, wood, and we could bring a cart of wood right out of the woods every load. Cart of wood, pair of horses, because you can always coming out of the woods. What you can haul up the hill, but then if you've got a steep hill going down, always carry a bridle chain that'll go under that hind runner and put that on right up over the nose of the sled. This the runner, that's the runner, and a short piece of chain and come up over here and down here, and then this piece of line went across there and the chain come up there. You put that right on that hind runner, that sled, that load of wood, and that would almost hold the load back for you. I would, and put it in right now, right after hay, and my father would hire somebody, or we all would pitch too, and we would put our wood in the woodshed, right under cover for winter. But that was early in the spring, just as soon as the snow got down a bit, we sawed this wood up. We'd get it cut and haul it up on the snow, of course. And then just as soon as the snow went down a little bit so you could work on it, we'd cut it up and have it ready for this coming winter.